So in Google Forms, there's a way to actually set up your form to be a sort of a quiz that you could get your students to do. And this is a video to show you how you could collect several forms or several quizzes into a single sheet. And then within that sheet, have a separate tab in there to collect the responses, and you could collectively look at how your students are doing. So I've set up a couple of quizzes on here as a Google form. So here's quiz number one. There are two questions on here. So how you set up the form to be a quiz is you go under settings um, and under quizzes. So first thing is that in order for this to really work, you must collect the students' addresses. It'd be nice, it's actually a nice habit to sort of email the responses to the students always so you can see what their answers are, and to limit the response to one per student. In this case, I've chosen not to let students edit after they submitted it, but that's going to be up to you if you want to do that or not. But under the quizzes tab here, you could toggle this and make this a quiz, and what happens is that you could choose points or add points and an answer to each of the questions. So once we do that, so in this case, there's my question. The answer is 10. You click on the answer key. You can actually type in what the answer is, and you can choose how many points this question is worth. So in each of these two questions in my quiz, they're only worth 1 point. So before we go off and fill in the quiz, we need to select the responses. So in this case, we're going to create a spreadsheet. So under here, we can select a response destination. I have not created a spreadsheet yet, so I'm going to create a new one. I'm going to change the name because it's no longer specific to quiz number one. I'm going to collect them all in a single sheet. So in this case, this might be unit 1, quizzes, responses. So let's name the sheet. And then we're going to hit create. And then you can see on my Google Drive, there's the creation of the spreadsheet that's there. So I'll quickly open it up, show you what it looks like. So in here, there's the several columns with the various pieces of data. The important ones here is going to be the email address that it captures for the student, what their score is, and what their actual answers are. So let's go off and fill this quiz in. So here you can see that it's going to collect my address, and I'm really on my game today for this quiz. The first one's 10, and I said the second answer is 1. So I'm going to submit. So this is what the student will see when they submit. And the response is recorded, and the students have a choice to see the score right away as I've set that up, and they can see that they got one of the 2 questions correct. And here we see the total points 1 out of 2. So if we look at a spreadsheet, that answer is automatically recorded in a tab here, and it's the only tab in this spreadsheet. So here, of course, my email address, what my actual score is, and what the 2 answers that I put in or the student put in. So I'm going to rename this tab. So I'll call this quiz number 1. Quiz 1. And then in here, I'm going to create another sheet. So in here, I'm going to add another sheet. And in this case, I'm going to rename this to maybe a summary or a tracking or however it is that you want to name it. And I'm going to make this the first tab that I see. And in here, I'm going to create several things. So I'm going to put in the email address of the student, or maybe the student name. And then I'm going to start creating columns for the quizzes. So here's quiz number 1 and quiz number 2. And then what I could do is, looking at this quiz here, I could start populating the summary sheet with a list of all the students in my class, along with the email address. So here I'm going to put in jtam@hts.ca, and then my student name here is John Tam. And then you could start populating this, even though not all of your students might have written the quiz, you could start populating this with other students in here. So let's say that my friend Bruce Springsteen is in this class as well. along with John Lennon. And maybe Janis Joplin. So here you can start populating this. And so as more students are in your class, you can sort of add this in. So the trick, what to do in here now is that we want to populate this cell with whatever this student got for this score. So how we could do this is with the index, the index function. So in this case, we're going to say index bracket. So this is what's column that we want to pull to put in here. So we go back to the quiz. We want to say we want this column. So even though there's one score in here, you can put a whole entire range. It's going to look for this entire range, and it's going to put that into there. So notice that what it does in there is it says it's going to go to sheet quiz 1, looking some cells C2 to C3. And then the next part is that we want to do a match. So what a match will do is that you have to give it a specific criteria. So we'll go back to our summary sheet. We want to match for this specific email address against all the email addresses that are in our other form. So here we're going to select the same ranges, but here we're going to choose in column B because that's what the email addresses are. And then we do a comma 0. So comma 0 means that here we want an exact match. And then bracket, bracket. So we just want to use the index function combined with a match to populate this in this score over here. So notice that in here, it'll do 1 out of 2. Okay, so what we could do, and I'm just going to go back and modify this, is that we want to anchor some of these cells so that when I copy and paste this formula to their cells, we always want to match at C2. So column C and always column 2. And in this case, because Albert tried to go through everything to extend your range as long as you want, you're probably unlikely to have 100 students write your quiz, but you might. And in this general formula, will sort of match that. We don't want to change A2 because in this particular case, we always want to match for this email address. But when we look for the ranges in the quiz 1 tab, again, we want to anchor the B column, which is the email column, and then also from cells 2 all the way to cell, again, I'll change this to 100. Okay, so that makes the change in there. It doesn't change anything because all I did was just anchor the cells and extended the range. But what here is I could copy and paste this down here. Now what happens is because Bruce Springsteen, John Lennon, and Janis Joplin have not written this quiz, this NA shows up because it couldn't find the email address. So if you don't like how you can keep it as this, but if you don't like how that looks, we can add an if error in front of this. So there's a function in spreadsheets called if error. So what this means is actually not a fan of this because it actually should be if not error. But anyways, what if error does is that if this first part or first parameter into the function it returns an error, then you could put in a separate value that we'll put in instead. So in this case, you could arbitrarily choose that's going to put in a value of -1. And I don't understand this, for whatever reason, we'll put in an if error that 1/2 disappears, but the actual raw number is there, which is fine. And here I'm just going to copy and paste this down. And what will happen here is that, again, because these other ones are not found, we're going to have a -1. Okay, so I'm just going to format this a little bit. So let me align this to the center. And so we could start faking results as they come in. So let's say let's go back into our spreadsheet to tab 1, and let's say that Janis Joplin wrote this. So let me copy and paste this row and say Janis Joplin wrote this, and let's say she did fantastic. She actually got 2 out of 2. And I can fudge the scores in here, and then we can see what happens in her summary. Oh, did I misspell that name? Janis Joplin. Oops, I forgot to put the @HDS on the CA. So they would register their email address, and then here we see that Janis Joplin would have got 2 in this score. So let's go off and fake populate the rest of the scores in here. And let's put in the different values to see what they might come up with. So let's put in Bruce Springsteen. So from what I understand, he was an actual high school dropout. So let's say you got 0. And let's say his answers was 9 and 10. And Bono, not Bono, John Lennon. And let's say that he was a scholar as well, and he got the same as Janis Joplin. So here we could go back to our summary sheets, and here are their scores. Okay, so let's kind of do this with quiz number 2 as well. So here the answer is 99, and let's say I actually get this one right. So this one's only 1 mark, so I'm going to submit. And then I could view my score. Obviously, hopefully I got 100% on this, 1 out of 1. And then this should pop. Oh, it didn't populate because I haven't added the form. So I have to go back into this quiz. And so this is the other part, is that I need to collect the forms inside a spreadsheet. So I'm going to click on the 3 buttons over here, and I'm going to say select a destination response. So in this case, I want to select an existing spreadsheet. I don't want to create a new one. And when you hit select, hopefully one of the ones that come up is the one that got created for us. So over here, there it is, first one, because it's the last one modified. So I'll select that. And so all responses will now go to the sheet. So here it said the spreadsheet was linked. If I go back, I actually see this new tab that's in there, and I see my responses. So I want to do the same thing. I'm going to rename this as something that's meaningful to me. So here it's going to be quiz 2. And let's go off in here, and let's fake some responses again. So let's change the order around. Let's do John Lennon first. Then Janis Joplin. And let's do Bruce Springsteen. Finally, Janis Joplin. Of course, you wouldn't have to do this. This is why it's important to set up your form to automatically collect the student email addresses, because it's going to use that email address that comes in. And let's say that John mistyped, he actually put in 98. Bruce actually got this one right this time, and Janis got it right. So we got 3 out of 4, got 100%. And now if we go up to our summary, of course nothing is showing up in here because I haven't set it up. So I'm going to just cut and paste this one cell that we did for quiz number 1 into there. Of course it's going to be looking at quiz 1, but we want to change this so that it's looking at quiz 2. And this is why it's important to anchor the C column and the B column as I did before, because that's when we set up these forms. The quizzes, they're always going to be looking at column B and column C, because that's where they store the student name, the student address, and also the results. So in this case, I'm going to change this quiz 2. Quiz 2. Why is it not showing up? Oh, that's why. I should have anchored column A. So because we always want to look at column A for the student email address, when I copy across, it doesn't want to switch to column B. So let me make that change. Copy and paste that across again, and then make this change in here as well. And then again, I want to look at quiz 2. And so quiz 2 is going to go up to that page. It's hard to tell that is doing that because it got the same answer. But I do that for the other students, we'll come up with the right number. So I must have mistyped Bruce Springsteen. Let me go look at the email address. Oh yeah, I forgot the G. So it makes that fix. Go back to the summary, and there we have them all. I forgot to change the score on John Lennon. He actually got this one wrong. So there it goes. And so here we go back and look at the summary, and there goes John Lennon is 0. Okay, so another thing that I just want to kind of quickly show you is that we could sort of conditionally format or format these cells based on certain values. So here we're going to highlight all this, and I'm going to do right click and do conditional formatting. So in here you could change the range of the cell because I already selected C2 to C5. Again, I can make this all the way to 100 if I want. If I'm going to have 100 students, doesn't really matter. But here we could apply the conditional formatting. So in this case, we could say that if the student got is equal to 0, so they got 0 on this, we're going to color code this red. Then we're going to add another rule where maybe again through the same cells, so C2 to C100, we're going to say that if they got is equal to 1, so in this case we know it's 1 out of 2, we're going to color code this yellow. And then finally we're going to add one last rule for this, is that we could add in so C2 to C100, if the cell is equal to, in this case, we know that they got it 100%, we're going to make that green. Okay, so obviously if you have more than 2 answers, you could color code this within certain ranges if you like. There's another way that you could do this that I'll show you in a bit. What you can also kind of do is, so I'm going to actually add another rule in here. Is in here, I'm just going to make what each of these quizzes out of. So in this case 2, I know this was out of 2, this is out of 1. I'm going to create another column to the right. So I'm going to extend this across. So really you have 2 columns for each of the quizzes. And in this here, I could actually make this a percentage. So in here I can actually calculate what the percentage is. So here I'm going to do a formula. This is equal to the previous cell divided by this cell. So again, I want to anchor C2 in this case because I want to divide by that value over there. So here it's a 50%. So copy this formula across. And notice that when I did this, I'll also happen to copy conditional formatting as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change these formats to be an actual percentage. So a number percent. So we actually see their percentages. And in this case, I actually want to change their conditional formatting. So what I want to do over here is I want to modify these rules. So I don't want to apply to D, I just want to put to C. And then I have to do that for each one of these, unfortunately. Okay, so these are not conditionally formatted anymore, but what I can do is I can create a conditional format for these particular cells. So I can sort of do the same thing. I can add another rule, and in this case I can say that it's in this case it's less than, and I want to say maybe less than 50%, so 0.5. We're going to make this red, and then we could add another rule where maybe this is in between. So it's in between, in this case 0.5, and I may say maybe 0.8, so between 50% 80%. I may make this yellow. And then finally one last rule where I'm going to say that is greater than or equal to, in this case 0.8, and that's going to be green. Okay, so unfortunately I didn't select the range. Let's make this D3 to D100. So do that for all of them. And so your percentages are color coded as well. Okay, so let's kind of do the same thing with the quiz number 2. So here I'm going to add another column. I'm going to spread this across. And this one we know is out of 1. Align that to the center. In this case, my conditional format will be a little bit different. So I'll highlight these 3 and let's add a rule in here. So in this case, because it's just one question, I'm going to say that if this is equal to 0, going to be red. And otherwise, if it's 1, I'm going to make it green. So it kind of pops up in there. And then what I'll do is I'll copy this column because I have conditional formatting for the percentage that I want. I'll paste that into there. Except the only thing I need to change in here is what's dividing by. In this case, it's not divided by C, it's divided by E. So I'll copy and populate that into there as well. And so that we get the percentages. And in here you could create a total column if you want. So here we have a total. In this case, we're going to add up the sum. In this case of this cell and this cell. Of course, I could just use the plus if I wanted to. And then in this case here, what the student's total is. So again, we're going to add up these two columns. Let's just do a straight add in this case. And let's populate that so we see the student totals overall. Let me just align this. And again, we could do a percentage. So let's spread this across. Center justify that. And let's make that a percent. This should have been a percent as well. And in this case, we do the same formula as over here. Kind of paste that into there. And then we can see what the student general percentage is. I shouldn't have anchored the column. That's a little bit of a pain now. So I can just change that to not E, but to G. And let's copy and paste this down there. So here we have an overall view of what the percentages are for the student based on all the quizzes. And as you want to add more quizzes into tracking this, you probably want to fill in columns over here and follow those exact same steps. Okay, so that's how you sort of combined all your summaries into one sheet and then creating this summary to track things.